Hey guys, this is the 6-star General Youngbuck, and you're about to watch a video of one of the few men who outranks me in esports. Here's Thorin.
Now, T1 has obviously won Worlds. This is the fourth title for the organisation. I know technically the organisation was bought by the Americans, but the historical organisation, T1, SKT, etc. It's the fourth time the organisation has won Worlds, which is a record. They already had the record. They had 3 before, and obviously no other organisation has even won 2. In theory, because the problem with that one is, in theory, yes, you have to say Samsung has, right? Because Samsung won in season 4 and then season 7. But obviously, those lineups were in no way the same, and we'd collapsed in the whole dual team. So I guess you can say Samsung won 2. They had 3 in T1 already. This is their 4th. No one else is anywhere close. This is obviously individually for Faker, his 4th title. He was already way ahead with 3. It was only people like Gen.G had 3 as well. Now he's on 4. No one else, none of the superstars are anywhere close in terms of Worlds titles. Obviously, people are going to think that helps his GOAT status. I don't think it does at all. He was already the GOAT if you counted it, accomplishments anyway, and he was quite far ahead in terms of accomplishments domestically, internationally, Worlds. You can go on any metric you want. He had everything, didn't he, on paper? Now, this is obviously, more significantly, the first International League of Legends title for Zeus, the top laner, Owner the jungler, Gumayusi, the ADC, and Keria, the support player. They did it without a traditional coach. Remember, during all those shenanigans in summer, when everything went to shit and Faker went out of the lineup, Gen.G just hopped on his fucking bike and fucked off. So Gen.G didn't get to win Worlds this time around. By the way, in a way, I'm actually glad, because even though he's just a coach now, there would have been the morons still technically, Faker never won a Worlds without Gen.G. Well, now he has. He can shut the fuck up. And spoiler, as I told you guys for years, he won plenty of fucking MSIs without Gen.G though, didn't he? Just putting that out there. So Gen.G had fucked off. Tom, almost like a meme, because he obviously used to be one of the replacements for Gen.G if we go back to season 6 or whatever. He fucking just popped up out and up, maybe it's season 5. He just popped up hello, I'm back. So he was like the fake coach while presumably Faker coached the team. And now he's a Worlds winning coach, if you believe that. So the key thing about the context of this win is T1 wasn't even a contender entering the tournament. Most people had Gen.G's just going to win Worlds. Maybe if you're an LCK fan and you love the sort of wave control style, maybe you thought Gen.G can win Worlds. Obviously, some people, Dom even said Shovy's the best player in the world. After that, essentially, your second/third best team in the world was never about T1. It was, are you an LPL fan? In which case, do you think it is LNG for the recency bias of the summer playoffs, or is it BLG for how they played ever since Tabe joined in the playoffs of spring, and most importantly, how they played through the regular season of the summer, where they were beating everyone? Basically, the only team they couldn't beat was Gen.G, and they had one of the best splits ever. So most people had the top 3 teams, not including T1. And as I just laid out, though, the LNG BLG one, there'd even be people who would have had T1, the 5th most likely team to win. Then you look at stylistic elements. You could argue stylistically, being as we didn't know how T1 would play and that this meta would suit them, you could argue stylistically KT had a higher chance of winning, because as Monty pointed out, KT looked like they might even be able to match up against Gen.G specifically. You look elsewhere in terms of teams, realistically, no one had Weibo having any chance whatsoever of winning. No one really thought KT could win. And by the way, if you watch the LCK, nobody thought Dam1 could. D+. Dam1, just even making Worlds was enough for them. There's a crazy world where that should actually have been Hanwha Life. And there's maybe some nightmare hellscape where DRX makes it again with Beryl. So no one thought Dam1 could, and obviously you saw by the way it went in Swiss, they weren't even that relevant, were they? So realistically, I even think, quite frankly, there might have even been Western fans who were delusional enough to be G2 was on the level of T1, because T1 didn't look like they could win. Faker was nowhere close to the best player in LCK, or nowhere close to the best mid laner. This is people like BDD were better than Faker most of the year. And then also, you consider, even take the baggage with the current stuff. So they hadn't won in the international finals when they had been at their peak, when they used to have a 90% win rate in all games. They hadn't won any LCK title this year. This isn't last year where they won the spring and on paper they were supposed to win the MSI and then Gen.G just came on strong in summer. No, this time around, they haven't won a single one. Yeah, they've made the finals, but every time they get convincingly beaten by Gen.G, and every time it's an incredibly close semi-final type game against KT Rolster, who themselves have had choking issues. They didn't even make the MSI final. Remember, they made the upper bracket final, but then they didn't make it because BLG beat them them in the lower. Then you look at LCK. Gen.G was comfortably the best team overall. Now, you can argue at times in the regular season in summer, KT looked like the best team, but after that, it's Gen.G. Gen.G was the one there, like the sort of default best team, and they proved to be the best team in the playoffs. Obviously, over in China, JDG's been incredibly dominant. Like, they'd only lost something crazy, like, I think it was I think it was something bonkers, like 4 or 5 best of 3s the entire year. They'd won every best of 5, and because they never lost one, even though these tournaments are all double limb, they just won every tournament. They won both LPL splits and MSI. So coming into this one, everyone had JDG a heavy favourite to win this one and win the Golden Road. Then you look, teams like LNG and BLG, very dangerous teams themselves with players. LNG had, like, arguably the player of the year in the LPL Scout, the 2-time MVP. He'd even been in the last finals. BLG looked fantastic. As I've said earlier, the regular season record, they looked awesome when they themselves were at MSI. They were in the final. They just couldn't beat JDG. And as I say, there's even an outside chance KT could have done something at this World. So coming in, no one had a T1 winning this Worlds beyond delusional T1 fans. Then you look, pre-Worlds, a lot of the same problems existed, but they hadn't levelled the individual play up. Like pre-Worlds, we could already see there's some issue with Faker's champion pool. He only really plays 2 to 3. And when he tries to force something like, quite frankly, even some of the equal forces weren't that great if you know how some of the amazing LPL players have played that champion. But I would say if you look at, like, if you ever tried to play like Jace and stuff like that, it just wasn't a good look. It didn't look anything like those monster LPL players playing that champion. And then also remember, KT Rolster hadn't actually banned out T1 when they played them in summer, so it even looked like, they just weren't cynical enough in draft. Zeus was known as a choker when he reached finals, justifiably so. Everyone knows Owner would always have one game he would just completely interweigh, and then Faker just wouldn't step up in finals. He didn't usually play bad. He just didn't do anything big, any big clutch moves. And Keria, his main problem in finals typically was that he have this amazing champion pool of non-meta champions and this crazy, like, edge in the meta in regular season games, and then he just wouldn't pick them in the big games, in the big finals, the big playoff series where you want to see him to pick them, play the champion only he can play it, and then dominate the game. He just wouldn't do that a bunch of the times. It looked like he was a bit hesitant in draft, and maybe they just defaulted to comfort. But you look at during Worlds, and as Worlds went on, unironically, almost every few games, T1 got better and better and better and better. Now, no one's going to remember that now. They're just going to remember the playoffs, pretend they were the greatest team to ever play League of Legends, could never have lost, and that they were always dominant here, and everyone else is just blind and a hater. All those other things I just mentioned didn't happen. T1 didn't fail to make the final of MSI. T1 did win all the LCK titles. LPL, no one even cares about the LPL. Who even watches it? You know what I mean? You'd have to actually be incredibly ignorant to even imply T1 were one of the best teams or should win before you saw them actually play the matches at Worlds, because when you came into this Swiss system, they clearly worked their way into form. The first game, the opener, was against Team Liquid. We now know that on paper, Team Liquid, no, in fact, in the server, Team Liquid might have been the worst team at Worlds in the main event. Well, you know what? In the opener, Pioshik was actually smurfing, and they were looking like they were going to beat T1. T1 looked a bit lackluster for the first part of that game. Then they had to play Gen.G in the next match. I noticed no T1 fans are mentioning that one. I thought Gen.G sucks, guys, and Trophy's a bomb. Well, why didn't you win this game then? Oh, that's right. This was a classic bad Zeus game, one of the rare ones at this Worlds, by the way, that already made you think, like, bloody hell, maybe we can't rely on this guy then. Meanwhile, Thorin's the top laner of Gen.G. We're supposed to believe on paper Zeus is one of the best carry top laners in the world, and Thorin is sort of a semi-meme, like maybe he can just hold it together against the top laner. Thorin has beaten him in all the finals, and in this game looked good. Zeus just looked like a bomb. And then Owner just had some issues, as he is known to do from time to time when pressure hits him. Then they played Cloud9, who, by the way, wasn't a good team at this time. They stopped them. Okay, easy work. Then they played BLG in the promotion series. If they lost, there was still a 2-2 match, but they won this game 2-0. Revenge from the MSI lower bracket game. That was the one where T1 didn't play how you would want them to play it, and they played BLG games. This time around, they played much more to their own style. They 2-0'd it. It was an impressive series. The difference is, at MSI, Jun, the jungler of BLG, was having his way with T1. He did not at all in this series, and people like Gumayushi looked good. And then you look at the playoffs. If you look at the playoff bracket, there's no world where T1's supposed to be able to win this Worlds. They had the hardest side of the bracket by far. That's one of the hardest sides I've ever seen. Especially if you actually are T1, by the way. You're supposed to lose every single match. So you look, in the quarterfinals you have LNG. As I've referenced earlier, not only did they have better odds than T1 to win Worlds, but there was a bunch of people had LNG, because of recency bias from LPL Summer, as the second best team in the world. And then you look at Scout, he's a contender for best player in the world. So a lot of people had LNG, if you look at the fundamentals, being the better team here, who should win. Now, in the match, a much better player already, even from Swiss system from T1. You already start to see them define the matter. And then, crucially for me, Faker did outplay Scout. Fuck all this gap shit. Like, this is where you know it's little kids, fucking nephews, children talking about the game. You all talk about gap when someone's up like a bit of CS. Gap is like you actually, there's an enormous gap between you and them specifically. Like, people just throw this terminology out. The main problem in that series is on the LNG side. LNG just looked incredibly hesitant and didn't turn up to play. Scout was invisible, and then Tarzan just straight up entered the series. So that's a big problem right there. T1 played well. This wasn't even their best series. They played well, though. Then the semi-final came, the JDG series. Now, obviously, on paper, JDG is supposed to win this all day long. They're going to be, I still think they are the greatest team to ever play League of Legends. They're going to win this. They're going to win Worlds. They're not going to lose the best of 5. Then they're going to have to break up because it's a $16 million lineup, right? Obviously, the key thing for me here is this is a rematch of the game of the year. If you didn't see it, the MSI upper bracket final between T1 and JDG was the best match of League of Legends played in 2023. That still holds right now. Go watch it if you haven't. It's a banger series, and obviously JDG won that one, and that looked like T1 when they were still somewhat good. This is T1 when they were still figuring out, are they actually good at this Worlds? The key thing for me here is, before you get into the play in the series, T1's entire understanding of the meta defined this series. It's clear that they even drew, unlike MSI where the opposite happened, and Gen.G and T1 got drawn into the BLG / the LPL style of play, this time around, T1 managed to lure all these teams to their idea of the draft. And so you saw their approach to the meta has defined the draft in the playoffs. I mean, with that said, by the way, JDG still so legit they were able to beat the Caitlyn bot lane that everyone's supposed to go, you can't give Gumayushi Caitlyn. They still did win that game. But you look, right, what's the sad about this series is it starts out looking like it's going to be amazing because game one's like a confident win from T1. Then you see the adaptation and you have the nice win from JDG. Then game 3 and game 4 were like this close to exploding into really epic games. And it could have either been a game 5 or either team could have won 3-1. JDG could have won 3-1. T1 did win 3-1. Because in game 3, this was a really close game. JDG was in position resource-wise to potentially win team fighting well because they're just the best team fighting team maybe ever in League of Legends. No one beats them if you're at even strength or roughly even strength. You have to be not only ahead, decently ahead if you want to win in team fighting. But actually, a couple of enormous individual players from T1 got them the wins. You had the amazing Orna Rel play, which sadly now will be forgotten because of the Faker player. That was incredible. Like, if he doesn't do everything he did in that play and flash over the top, then I think they just lose that fight. And that is the game heading to GG, and then there wouldn't have been a Faker play later. Then later, you have the Faker, what's probably now going to be the signature play of this Worlds run because they won, which was the Faker Azir ult, where he manages to catch them. Obviously, even more sweet, that's revenge on Ruler, since Ruler in Season 7 Worlds had himself a similar sort of catch on T1 and Faker. So kind of like narratively pleasing and cyclical, has a resonance there, right? And then in game 4, another really close game that's looking like it's going to go really awesome. And JDG's about to power up team fighting wise. The problem is Ruler Zeri it was like this close to popping off, but he couldn't quite get the pop off going. He got some kills, he got in position, and then just couldn't quite get it going. It was so close to the team fights, and T1 wins 3-1 justifiably. I will say, this is the one where people mega exaggerate that, like, Faker gap, Knight. No, Knight looked like, quite frankly, he played a bit subdued. He actually played a bit more like Faker did in past international finals. It's never that Faker choked. He just didn't make the big plays and the big clutch plays. Knight didn't really manage to in that regard. Also, you look, Knight's jungler was having an absolute fucking nightmare. Kanavi was playing an absolute joke. That 4th game, for real, like, I'm saying it as a joke facetiously, but I almost mean it seriously. It was so bad. That's like should be investigated for win trading. Like, that looked actually outrageous how that guy played the Belveth. What's he even doing picking Belveth in the 4th game of the best of 5 series, by the way, when we've played all year long, we've had all these amazing and we're going with a Belveth to decide the tournament fate. So not a fan of that. With that said though, you got to love the way T1 played. I mean, what was not to love? Zeus outmatched 6-9, something everyone said couldn't be done. Faker slightly outplayed Knight and had some key signature plays. Keria's champion pool pretty much defined the whole draft. I mean, missing before that was one of the best supports in the entire world. That you had to perma his fucking Rakan all day long. And you saw, he was able to play the center, etc. Like, he's a legit fucking player. So it's just incredible to me that they actually won this series. Then you come to the final, and the irony is, the final ends up actually being the easiest series. One of the easiest matches of the entire tournament for T1 because their finals opponent was a joke. Remember, this could have been Gen.G who beat T1 in all those finals and in the Swiss system. This could have been BLG, the team that T1's beaten in the promotion game, but there's that epic MSI best of 5. And now, it's all these weeks later. It'd be interesting to see the matchup, right? But the problem is, because BLG beat Gen.G and then BLG managed to lose to Weibo. I don't think Gen.G could have lost to Weibo, but that order of matches can happen. And then Weibo themselves are already there. Why? Checks notes. Because they've beaten NRG and a bunch of Westerns. What? So, okay, then it turns out the only Asian team that fucking Weibo has to beat from the LPL or LCK to make the final of Worlds is BLG themselves. Whatever. And it was just the Shy having like a sort of throwback tournament, and especially that match, that allowed them to even do it, because Bin was really awesome, but the Shy sort of edged him out and actually outplayed him. BLG would have made for a way better final. I could guarantee people like Bin would show up in the final in a way that I think Weibo didn't. This is actually disgraceful, the way Weibo played in this final. The Shy was supposed to be a win condition. He didn't even exist in this game. Not only did he let him get counterpicked all day long, then he had one kill, and Zeus completely outplayed him in every regard. So the sad thing is, Weibo just didn't even allow this to be an exciting, good final. Like, T1 actually just sort of got handed the title once they got there. So if you look at it, Zeus is the MVP of this tournament. He was easily the best player from T1 for my money throughout the whole tournament. He only basically had, the Gen.G game that wasn't that good. He was best in the playoffs. He gapped every opponent he played. And remember, he played Zika, who was actually one of the few players who was giving you a chance against 369. Then he beat 369. And then remember, his role was one of the only ones that wasn't even a joke in the final, because he was playing the Shy, who, by the way, was like the other player who was probably on for like tournament MVP and was playing great. And then he beat him as well. So I think for Zeus especially, what an amazing tournament run. I've always said he was supposed to, he was destined, if you watched his play, to become part of that carry top lineage of Smeb and Flame and Marin and Duke and all those, the Shy, the greatest top laners, Reaperd, Macnoom, the great Korean carry top laners. Now he can actually join that category for real, because he hasn't choked in a big final finally. Keria was the most influential player for the tournament because of what he did to the actual draft. You can say all you like about Faker and how he played the Azir Zori matchup. Yeah, he played it well. And he crucially was using the ult of Azir more than like, it wasn't like the Azir champion was just dominating the game. He was finding his spots. But at the end of the day, Keria warps the draft, given his draft edges. Zeus outplays everyone at top lane. Gumayushi arguably was the best ADC in the tournament, and then Orna actually didn't really choke and had a couple of big games. So Faker was good, but he wasn't even close to the best player on his team for my money. Faker had some good players, and crucially some clutch players, like he has the signature player of the tournament. But let's be real, if you're a T1 and a Faker fan, do you just hate reality or something? Faker hasn't done this for years. The last time there was an international final where Faker was clutch was like, in theory, 2017, but even he couldn't do anything in that final. He was more clutch before the playoffs and that. Like, you'd have to go back to like season 6 or go to some of the MSIs or something, right, to find Faker being clutch. He just hasn't done this in the big finals. It's one of the things I found so disappointing. People acted like it wasn't that everyone said Faker and T1 choke in the finals. They acted like everyone said T1 can never win any best of 5 ever. And so then when they were winning against LNG, that was supposed to prove that they didn't choke anymore and they would win Worlds. Like, as I've alluded to before, the big problem I have with the T1, because everyone now is like, I love it that they've run it back and they're going to go. They didn't have a proper opponent in the final. If their problem before was choking wave finals, look, it's mental they even managed to lose to DRX last year. There's no way that should even be possible on paper. But the idea that like they just got to lay up this final, I actually think it would have been better, even if the result had been the same, for Gen.G to have been the final on the other side of the bracket. And then at least it would have been an epic way to win the title. This one was just whack, wasn't it? There was nobody turned up who actually could have won that game. So I just think it's just sad. Like, we've never seen this T1 before, ever. Like, look, they've played better in regular seasons, but this is a big final. This is a fucking Worlds final. And so I do wonder what would happen if the opponent in the final had been tougher. You could argue from the DRX angle, look, in theory, DRX was worse than Weibo, right? DRX won, so okay. Then there's the whole Dom angle of this stupid thing where people are like, he hates T1, so you must hate when they do that. Right, let's just make the analogy about food, guys. Imagine Dom is saying, essentially, I have incredibly high standards when it comes to food, and this food, you just keep giving me a standard burger. That's not that good. I want a filet mignon. Then suddenly you come along, and instead of a burger, you prepare him a filet mignon, a T1 filet mignon, and it's incredible with all flavour, perfectly. And then you go, he's going to hate that because he hates T1. No, he hates the burger, you dumb fuck. If they'd been the filet mignon the whole time, he's obviously not a liar, is he? He loves League of Legends. He'd have been loving T1 the whole time. The joke is Dom himself is someone who's an LPL fan, but he himself said Chovey's the best player because when he watched Chovey in the regular season, he was the best player. Then he watched him in the LCK. He looked like the best player. This is someone who loves League of Legends, doesn't hate T1. He hates annoying T1 fans and lying, disingenuous pieces of shit like you who say that he hates T1 and Faker and the players. Then obviously this win has great significance for everyone involved. Like, they were an all-time great roster that had blown their window. Remember what Monty said in spring? There was a point in time where this team had like a 90% win rate. That's like probably the greatest win rate of all time when you consider they're playing LCK and international tournaments to the final. But they'd never won any of the international tournaments. They just won, one LCK title with this 5-man lineup. They won spring last year. That's it. Then they lost the other three in a row to different Gen.G lineups, the one with Ruler, and then now the one that has Pays twice this year. You look at that team, their regular season win rate, if they could have done that in finals, they would now be sitting on 2 Worlds back-to-back and 2 MSIs back-to-back. That would be like the greatest team on paper that ever played League of Legends. Oh, and by the way, if you want to take out Zeus and just go to when they had the 4 of them at 2021 Worlds, they could have won 3 Worlds. That was like Game 5 against Dam1, who themselves then went to the final, had Game 5 against CDG. Like, on paper, they could have won that one too when they had Canada or whoever it was instead of Zeus. They had a unique style. I think that's the most significant thing to me. It's the way that they won. Like, they played around Faker in the sense that Faker is the one who clearly is the shot caller and the captain and the coach to some degree. To me, this is where everyone's missed the point. If you're still trying to force the narrative, like Faker was the GOAT and used to have the highest individual level, so yada, 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 it's sort of like he does. And so him winning now proves that he used to have the highest level. In fact, he still has the highest level now, and now he's the GOAT right this second. Now, he's not the GOAT right this second, as in this isn't the Faker you'd pick to play all the time to show how good League of Legends can be. The first half of his career up to 2017 is the player who's the hard carry best individual player I test crazy of any player ever in League. The player since then is a high, I wouldn't even say Doimby because Doimby was once the best mid in the LPL. This is more like Zhao Hu. This is someone who's winning with his mind and his ability to play the map and his ability to play off his teammates and give them what they need and give them resources and understand the game. That's what's so cool, is that he won once as the super hard carry superstar individual mechanics guy and then once as the mastermind play around the game, don't have his crazy hands, but use my teammates and use the map to win the game. That's dope. That's a fucking narrative right there. Then obviously now they're going to keep the roster together. Almost certainly they would break it up before because it had all these years of underperformance. Now they're going to keep the same lineup and run it back. Now I'm not actually a fan of that. I have to say, this is where, in my opinion, Belichick style or Man City style, this is where you gamble on a change even though you did win. Like for me, the obvious ones you gamble on is, look, Owner had a great Worlds this time. I've seen him interweigh so many important playoff games. If I could get a really world-class jungler, Korean, I'm getting him over Owner. And then quite frankly, depending on money, I'd have considered going for like a Viper or Ruler over Gumayushi. Because I think if you take the same team, I mean, by the way, the dream, if you really had unlimited money, is imagine if, by the way, you just put Canyon in T1, this T1, and then you put the ADC as Viper or Ruler. So they get to have Keria as their support. And then Faker shot calls the game. By the way, how do you beat that team? Like, I already think if you look at some of the other teams, like the Gen.G one looks mega, JDG is going to be very interesting if they keep Knight. Dude, if you make the T1 lineup I've just referenced, isn't that like everything on the table? Can't you win the Golden Road next year? I think that would be insane. So I think people are getting a bit too caught up in the romance of this particular lineup of T1 winning. Like, the obvious thing I have to ask is this. If next year and in future seasons you don't get a meta like this, that Keria can specifically own and dominate and uniquely have depth in, will you actually be as dangerous as a team? I don't think so. I think Zeus has a chance to be the best mid laner, top laner in the world. I don't think Faker can be the best mid laner. I think Gumayushi probably can't be the best ADC because for most of the year it's going to be, you'd think like a Viper, a Ruler, one of these sorts of a players. So I don't really buy that. Keria might be the best support. Order's not going to be the best jungle. So I actually do think this is a mistake to just keep the same lineup. I understand the romance of running it back, but I don't think you're going to get another Worlds. I don't even know if you'll win LCK. By the way, you won 1 out of 4 times. So I don't know that you're going to win one. I would have gone with the change. I think this doesn't necessarily make T1 the best for next year. Then in terms of like, fight about Faker's GOAT status, this doesn't really affect it much. It does in the sense that like he won it in a different way and he showed more well-roundedness, and individually he held up fairly well against some of the best players at mid lane. They didn't really go awesome themselves. It's not like they played awesome and then he played awesome and outmatched them. And it's not like he personally shut them down. Like, these are like, that's like a WWE narrative, guys. Go watch the games. Show me how he individually, as a mid laner, shut down Chovy and Knight. He didn't, did he? Come on. Use your brain and scout and all. Of course he didn't. And by the way, this wasn't prime level Faker. It wasn't even close. You didn't see prime level Faker. You think this is prime level Faker. It was a good one-off. Where he's at in his career, really old guy with massive longevity. It's an insane run. But if you took the nameplates off, it's not like the craziest World's mid lane performance ever. And then also, I'll just say this. Faker didn't have to be the best player in any of the playoff series. That's not the way he won the tournament. Now, the longevity, I do think, is very impressive. But it's more like longevity paired with, because he's changed his role and sort of resource management, still being capable of being in a winning side. Because I actually think if you want to go off raw longevity, I think Deft's career is much more impressive. Deft right now is still one of the best, absolute best players at his role. All the stats show it. Eye test shows it. He never had to become a supportive element or a role player or helper. That he's still the main guy potentially on his team. So I do think the longevity bit is incredible. But even then, it's not like there's no one else has ever had longevity. So to me, it's the way Faker's sort of like changed his story. Crucially, changed his story. Not just added to it, changed his story. And then the knock-on effect with this fabulous talent in T1 who finally didn't choke. Finally, people like Zeus did play the way they should. Keria was willing to pick. Faker did make the clutch plays. Ona had... That would, by the way, if he never plays another great game in his entire career, that Rel game alone was enormous. It basically changed the history of League of Legends. If he doesn't do that play, I'm almost certain Gen.G comes back, wins the series either 3-1 or 3-2, and they just win this Worlds. And we're all talking now about, like, good run from T1, but they should, like I'm just saying there, they should probably change maybe, like, jungle and ADC, who knows about top. Instead, now the whole conversation is, we got to run it back. So you see how that was an incredibly epic player, right? But it wasn't just Faker, though, was it? Obviously, in this case, it had nothing to do with it. Only did that all himself. I may not have the most supporters in the world, but the ones I do have are straight fire. And they include Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Frisky, Ahmed Hadjou, Torin, Tobias Bernasconi, Animosity, Tosh, Jensen Goh, and you know it always is a special thanks going out to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my show? Do you want to see things I say on my Discord, little piece of straight fire I drop in the Patreon only channels, stories I tell people in the other ones? Do you want to ask a question in my monthly AMA? Do you want teasers, find out who the next guests are for Reflections interviews? Maybe you want to be one of those people who takes part in the long form discussion with me where we talk about whatever's on your mind in esports. Well, if any of those or more sound interesting, why not support me, put your money where your mouth is, and join the Skrilluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.